Hey 6th graders, wanted to welcome you to the first ever edition of Backyard Science with all of your 6th grade science teachers. This week we're going to be talking about the water cycle.
Hey guys, this is Miss Smoko. I'm coming to you to give you a little bit of a review on condensation and precipitation. And let's review some of those key terms. Key terms: condensation. This is the process of water vapor changing into a liquid. And then you have humidity. That's the amount of water vapor that is actually in the air mass. And then you have precipitation. This is any form of water that falls to the Earth's surface from clouds. If you look at the diagram of the water cycle here, you can see that evaporation occurs over some form of body of water. And then you have condensation occurring as that vapor and that air mass continues to rise. And then you have precipitation occurring. Let's look at these a little bit closer. So condensation. As air masses are warmed, they pick up water through evaporation. As I said, that usually occurs over a large body of water, like a lake, a river, an ocean. The water vapor in the air stays there until the air mass is heavy or saturated. That means that there's no more room for water vapor to get into that air mass. The condensation occurs as the water vapor cools and then changes from a gas back to the liquid. So as that air mass is rising, it is cooling, and that water vapor is also cooling. Water vapor cools as the air mass that it is in rises. The air mass rises through one of two processes, either convection or because there's some type of geographic feature like a mountain that's in its way, forcing it to rise up. This rising causes the condensation, which also causes the formation of different types of clouds. We transition from condensation to precipitation. The higher the air mass moves, the colder it gets and the more condensation that occurs until those drops of water are really, really large. When the air mass can no longer hold the weight, we have some form of return to Earth with those water droplets. Precipitation is any form of water that falls to the Earth from the clouds. There are four types that we talk about. So there's rain. Rain is just the wet water that is coming down out of the sky. It usually has no other combination. It's just wet and occurs when the air mass is warmer than the freezing point. Then you have sleet. Sleet occurs when the air mass is around freezing point, and it's a mixture of rain and snow, and that's when we get those really icy road conditions that can be dangerous. And then you have snow, which is when the water is coming down, but the air mass that it's coming out of is less than freezing. And then you have hail, and hail forms, it's an ice, and it usually forms from the rapid cooling. It's a rapid cooling that causes the water to freeze. I hope you all have a great day and continue on learning about water cycle. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week.
In the water cycle, runoff happens as water hits the surface of the earth and then travels along either the top of the ground or underneath. If it's traveling along the surface, this is called surface runoff. If it's traveling underneath the ground, meaning it sinks down in there a little bit and travels maybe along a pebbled area deep under the ground, that's going to be subsurface runoff. Sub generally means beneath or underneath. So surface runoff would be the water that's going across the top of the surface, where subsurface runoff is water that is under the ground but still flowing. Reservoir. A reservoir is any place where water is stored and held. Generally this can be lakes, they could be man-made, they could be natural, but a reservoir is going to hold water and be someplace for water storage. An aquifer you might find underneath the ground. A lot of times near a reservoir, there will be a spot under the ground where there's a huge area of water storage. This is called an aquifer. Aquifers are what are tapped when people are trying to dig wells. So they will dig their well down until they hit a big patch of underground water. That patch of underground water is called an aquifer. It's just another place where water can be found within the earth.
All right, so let's talk about what happens after runoff. The water is going to accumulate or gather, and we call that accumulation. That's where water is going to gather together into a large body of water, such as a lake, river, stream, even an ocean. Hey guys, Emery and I are going to talk to you today about evaporation. Notice how the sun is beating down out here. It's really, really hot. So that's going to allow some evaporation to take place. So any moisture that's out there is going to be heated up, and then so it's going to change form from a liquid to a gas and rise up. The driving force behind the water cycle is the sun. So I'm going to create a time-lapse video for you to see how water can evaporate just on concrete.
Hey, 6th grade science students, welcome to Butterfield's Yard and welcome back to some science. So this week the county sent you some really cool materials about the water cycle, and so we're just going to review parts of the water cycle. The first part that I'm going to cover is transpiration. It's a really cool thing because it's like plants breathing. So plant structures pull that groundwater up after it has precipitated and it's infiltrated into the ground. Trees, plants, grass, all those producers pull the water up through their roots, and it enters through the plants, and then out of the leaves when they get hot, they're going to kind of exhale some water vapor into the air. There's a really fantastic video on Canvas about transpiration and the Amazon rainforest, so totally go check it out. And when that water leaves these plants, it's going to act kind of like evaporation. It's going to enter back into the air, go up, condensate, and join back in that eternal loop of the water cycle. The second concept I want to talk about is respiration, and that's you breathing. Mainly you breathing, other animals breathing. When you exhale, not only do you release air, well, a lot of carbon, right? But when you exhale, it's also containing water vapor. That's why in the winter when the air's cold and your breath is warm, that water vapor condensates in the air and it turns visible so you can see your breath in the winter. So transpiration, plants kind of exhaling water vapor, respiration, you exhaling water vapor. All that takes place in the water cycle. You may not exhale a lot of vapor. This little plant here next to me, which I think might be some honeysuckle, it may not contribute a whole lot, but all of the producers, all of the consumers releasing water vapor make a huge impact. I hope this finds you well, and we'll see you next week.